Okay, let's take a look at points and graphs. So in this lesson, we will review how to plot points on a coordinate plane, and we will also graph some of the equations. Okay, so here, blow it up just a little bit. On this first problem here, we want to plot the point -4, 2. So first of all, remember that that first coordinate represents x and the second coordinate represents y. So the x coordinate tells us to move left or right from the origin, left if it's negative, right if it's positive, and the y coordinate tells us to then move up or down after we've taken the x coordinate movement into consideration. So for this first one here, we have x is -4, so from the origin or from the center here, we would move to the left 4 places, and that would be where x is -4 is located. And then we would go up 2 places. So -4 and up 2 places, +2, fall right there. And that will be the point -4, +2. Okay, same idea on number 2 here. -3, -4, left 3 places, and since the y is negative, we would go down 4 places from the origin. So from the origin, we would move left 3 places and then down 4 places. And that point will fall there. Okay, now what if we had a fraction? So if we have a fraction here, we have an improper fraction where the larger number is in the numerator. I would suggest changing this to either a mixed number or a decimal. So I'm just going to change it to a mixed number, -1 1/2 and -2 1/2, and then plot that point. So I'll go to the left 1 1/2 unit, and then from there I will go down 2 1/2 units. So to the left 1 1/2 units, down 2 1/2 units, so right about there. So again, my tip would be to change those to either mixed numbers or decimals to give you a better idea of where those points are located. All right, on this problem number 5 here, we're kind of shifting gears a little bit. It says find 7 ordered pairs to the equation y equals x squared minus 5, then determine its graph. So they give us some coordinates to place in for x, some values to place in for x. We need to replace x with each one of those values and get the output for y. So we'll find out what happens when, first of all, x equals -3. So when x equals -3, we have -3 squared minus 5. And remember, -3 squared would be -3 times -3, which is +9, and 9 minus 5 would be 4. And then we'll do the same thing. We will replace x with -2 and see what we come out with. So y equals -2 squared minus 5. So -2 squared is +4, and 4 minus 5 is -1. And then we'll continue with each one of those values. So -1 squared is 1, 1 minus 5, -4. And since we have x squared up here, we know that this is a parabola, so we should have a vertex, and the graph should make a U shape. So here we have 1 minus 5, -4, and you'll begin to see some symmetry here. All right, so if we were to plot those points, then we would be able to clearly see that which parabola goes with those coordinates in that equation. So first of all, let's start with the vertex right here because we have symmetry on each side of the vertex. 0, -5. So 0, -5. And since we know it's a U-shaped figure, it has to be C or D. 0, -5, starting 0, going down 5. Well, if my other points match up, then that's where we are. Now be careful here. If you look at your coordinate plane, we're actually counting by twos on each unit. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So when I look at -1, -4, I'm going in between uh, the origin and that next tick mark. I'm going down here. And then if I look at -2, -1, -2, -1, and then -3 and 4. And then you can match those other ones up as well. So you see the answer is C there. So anytime you're given an equation and you have that table, you take each one of those values, substitute them in for x, and get your output for y for each one of those x values. Okay, so let's take a look at another one. How about number 7 here? It says graph the equation of y equals the absolute value of 5, and then gives us some x values. Now remember, absolute value, those two bars, means the distance away from 0, the absolute distance away from 0. So when we find the absolute value of a number, the result coming out of that absolute value will be positive. So if we have y equals the absolute value of -3 minus 5, the absolute value of -3, the absolute value of -3 is +3, and 3 minus 5 will give us -2. And then go through, do the same thing for each one of the values. Again, the absolute value of -2 is 2, so that pulls it out of the bars, and 2 minus 5 is -3. Absolute value of -1 is 1, and 1 minus 5 is -4. The absolute value of 0 is 0, and 0 minus 5 is -5. Well, what about the absolute value of 1? Well, same thing. It's always going to come out positive, so the absolute value of 1 is 1, and 1 minus 5 is -4. And again, with this type of problem, you will also see some symmetry around the vertex. So the absolute value of 2 is 2, 2 minus 5 is -3. The absolute value of 3 is 3, and 3 minus 5 is -2. So if I were to plot those points, starting with the vertex here, because that's where symmetry begins above and below it, then I see 0, -5. So either this one or this one. That's where I have 0, -5. And then -1, -4. So it's a little bit above that vertex, -1, -4. So that tells me that if I plot all my points, then graph B would be the correct choice. Okay, let's take a look at this one. It says the table of values was generated by a graphing utility with the table feature. Now it wants us to determine the points where the graphs of y1 and y2 intersect. That means where on here, or why does y1 and y2 have the same value? Well, we look at when x is -3. Well, these values are different, so we know it's not there. Here, look at when x is -2, the 10 and the 4, the results are different. But we get down here to where x is 0, and we see that these y values are the same here. So at the point 0, 6, those two graphs intersect. If we keep going down one more line, we see that when x is 1, the y values are the same. So comma, because it says use a comma to separate the answers if needed, comma 1, 7, we have another point of intersection. When x is 2, the y values are different. When x is 3, the y values are different. So the places where they intersect is when x equals 0 and when x equals 1. Okay, what about x and y intercepts? X and y intercepts. Well, remember now, your x-intercept always has a y-coordinate of 0, so it's always in the form of a being any real number and b being 0. And your y-intercept is the opposite of that. It always has an x-coordinate of 0, where c is any other number. So the x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. The y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So when we're looking at this particular graph, we see that the graph of the parabola opens to the right and it only crosses the x-axis. So what does that tell us about a y-intercept? That's correct. If it doesn't cross the y-axis, then it does not have a y-intercept. However, we do have an x-intercept. The x-intercept is the point where the graph intersects the x-axis right there. And if we count over 1, 2, 3, 4, we see that that is the point 4, 0. So I would select A and 4, 0. All right, and then number 10 here says we have a line graph showing the number of awakenings during the night for a particular group of people. Use the graph to estimate at which age women have the least number of awakenings during the night and what the average number of awakenings at that age is. So if we look at our graph over here, we see that the women graph is plotted in red, the men are plotted in blue. We also see down here at the bottom that this axis represents our ages from 5 to 7 through 75, and then this vertical axis represents the number of awakenings. So when women have the least number of awakenings during the night at what age? So I'm looking at age down here. I'm going to find the very lowest point because it says the least number of awakenings. So I'm going down, 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 and I see right about here. That's where the women have the least amount of awakenings, right there. So now I need to analyze this and fill in the blanks. It says at what age? Well, the age axis is at the bottom here, running horizontally. So if I look up, that's between 10 and 20, so I'm going to say 15. So at about the age 15, when they have the least amount of awakenings at night. And how many awakenings? Well, I'll look here and go over, well, about 2. Alright guys, good people. I hope you enjoyed that video. Hope you found it to be helpful. I look forward to continue to work with you. Have a good one.